Welcome. Welcome to our session, our second session, this business session this morning. Data center boom. Boy, it worked. That was so cool. I saw so many heads go. No, I won't do it again. I don't want to scare you. So what is data center boom about? So data center boom is frankly I have heard it's similar to the Industrial Revolution, which none of us were alive when it happened. So none of us have any scale of what this means. But what we're seeing is a new infrastructure being built all over the world. And this infrastructure is outpacing any other infrastructure build going on by like 100x. In investment, in product going in everything. And the people who have gotten involved in this business are seeing incredible opportunities in front of them, things that we've never seen as an industry. And what's really neat about this revolution, this new data center revolution, is that building automation is right in the middle of it, right in the middle of it. So we are square in the middle of it. Why? Because it's a facility and it relies on technology, which is something the building automation industry has always been. It's been technology for facilities. Now we have new technology-based facilities, and guess what? BAS is an integral part of it. And I've been fortunate to witness this starting up and building, and I've watched it change and evolve, and it's been so quick that I can't keep up anymore. I can't keep up. So I could talk all day about the topic, but instead we have some different experts with different use cases that we're going to dive into, and we're going to try and better understand what this boom is doing to the BAS industry and how different people are working within it. So let's get started. I'm gonna go through my panelists one by one. I'll introduce them. They're going to tell you a little bit about themselves, their company, their position, and then we'll talk about their use cases a little. So let's start with Robert from Conti. From Detroit. Robert, welcome. Could you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and the company? And
Sure. My name is Robert Prinke. I'm a project manager with Conti Corporation. I've been asked to come here today to talk about one of our more recent projects, which happened to be a liquid-cooled direct-to-chip data center for supporting a 40 megawatt load. A challenge for this particular project wasn't really the scale of it for us. It was mainly the timeline. Our client wanted us to design, build, and implement it within 6 months. So in order to get that done, we had to get with the owner early on into the process to discuss control decisions and design. It was essential that we got to talk to him to educate him on integration strategies and requirements before construction and equipment decisions were locked in. With our systems, we build them with redundancy in design. Uptime is everything, and what we've found is that adding redundant hardware is the only part about redundancy anymore. It's also about being flexible, adaptable, and the long-term maintainability of the design. That's why we chose to use a DDC approach instead of a traditional PLC system. Historically, the PLC systems were viewed as more robust, especially in industrial environments. And years ago, there was a bigger gap between the different hardwares as far as speed and capability. That gap has narrowed significantly recently. Modern DDC platforms are powerful, reliable, and more adaptable than many people realize. For our project, adaptability mattered more than anything. Supply chain and lead time challenges made us pivot multiple times during this project due to the time constraints. We had to pivot between different valve vendors and different controller vendors in order to maintain the schedule that we needed to do. If we had locked ourselves into a closed industrial ecosystem, that just would not have been possible. Instead, we leveraged Niagara because of its open architecture and broad compatibility between multiple manufacturers. We integrated platforms including Distech and Honeywell seamlessly in the same environment. That flexibility allowed us to keep the project moving despite the constant supply chain pressures. And honestly, that was the real value proposition here. With the open DDC architecture, you're not locked into a single manufacturer, not a single proprietary ecosystem. You have options, you can adapt, and you can scale. And in today's market where lead times can determine whether a project succeeds or fails, that becomes really valuable. In addition to the flexibility, the supportability is just as important as the initial functionality. At ControlsCon, we have hundreds of DDC contractors here that can support a DDC system or customly program one. How many people here could do the same with a PLC system? From what I'm told, it's far fewer. You might be locked into a handful of vendors or maybe even a single one. For mission critical facilities, that creates risk. What this project reinforced for us is that modern data center infrastructure requires more than just good hardware. It requires collaboration, flexibility, open integration, and systems that can evolve as technology and operational demands change. The control strategy cannot be rigid. It has to move as fast as the project itself.
Yeah, cool, Robert. And I think you kept mentioning speed, speed, speed. You were the project manager on that, huh?
I'm not the project manager on this particular project, but it's the same no matter what project you're on. You got to schedule, you got to figure out some way to maintain it.
So it's kind of like this is your guys' first data center project, and it's been pretty intense, huh?
This one hasn't been our first data center,
No?
just the first one with this insane of a schedule, to be honest with you.
Okay, gotcha. And have you guys felt like a change in how you guys operate in terms of because of these data center jobs? Is it something where you guys are changing how you guys project manage things going forward, or?
It's honestly, it hasn't been that big of a change from the project management standpoint. It's still all about scheduling, lining everything up ahead of time, procurement. Just being a big fish isn't the biggest thing anymore because there's now whales in the landscape. So when they want a valve, they want controllers. We still get overridden now. So being able to bounce around or be flexible with what we can use, it's definitely helped.
And they really are more interested in getting up than they are what you're putting in. They want it up as fast as possible, right? That's the pressure.
Up as fast as possible, get it operational, make sure it works right.
Yeah, cool. Okay, thanks. Thank you, Robert. All right, Derek Dreyer with RoveAssist. Derek, a little bit about yourself and.
Sure. Hi, I'm Derek. I'm from a company called RoveAssist, which is a pretty well-kept secret in the industry, in my opinion. I got my start. I've been at the company since last century. I started as an intern in the 90s. One fun fact, and when I was doing, I think, Scott, you called it the evil guys yesterday, the industrial automation guys.
Yeah, the industrial systems integrators, whom a lot of building automation contractors are competing. There's a whole nother faction of contractor, the industrials, and they're going after the same BAS work in the data center space as the BAS guys. So they're not bad guys. I just mean, like, if you're on the BAS side, you're.
Yeah, so we actually do both. I started as a manufacturing engineer, and my cool story or claim to fame at RoveAssist is I actually worked on the controls for the first furnaces for Corning that made glass for the first iPhones.
Get out of here.
I did. I didn't know that's what it was till I read an article in a magazine 10 years later because it was a code name, but it was definitely the project.
Very cool.
So that was at a pilot plant in Kentucky, and then I went and did the automation on the mass production lines in Japan for a couple years in the early 2000s. But by virtue of another project in Asia in 2009, 2010, we took on our first big building automation project in Singapore. And we automated 17 buildings and brought them all back to a Siemens PCS7 PLC SCADA, which was a terrible design. But we managed the project and got it done. And then when I came home to the US, we started a sister company, RoveAssist Building Technologies, to focus on being the good guys in the building space. And I'm not going to go. You were very well rehearsed. Mine's going to be more ad-libbed and messy. But 2012, it was me and my partner Craig. This year we'll pass 1,000 employees, and a lot of that is tied to the scaling because of data center construction.
Yeah, so Derek's story, I was fortunate to get involved with Derek before he got involved in the data center project. So Derek and I met in the industrial world, large industrial based in Detroit. Derek was interested in doing work for them because of that, like I said, that industrial systems integrator background. And Derek I had to teach him a little thing called Tritium, Niagara, to work with the automotives. And what right away, I was so impressed because Derek and his team, like, it wasn't a matter of whether or not they were going to buy it. All they wanted to do is figure out how to use it because they knew what the owner wanted, and then they followed suit. But his company has evolved to where they now are one of the premier BAS suppliers to hyperscale data center companies across the world. And Derek's company is scaling at an incredible rate. And Derek, could Could you just talk a little bit about that journey from like that, like when we were together working on those nice little industrial projects to today, where you have these enormous projects that are being brought to you?
Sure. We drive our internal HR and recruiting team nuts because we update our hiring plan like every 3 weeks and go back to them and tell them we need 20% more people than the last version.
Wait, before you go there, and let me guide you a little bit more, but without giving out all your secrets, could just help people understand, how did you put your company in position to get that work to begin with? What was it that put you guys in that spot as a company? Could you share that with everybody?
Yeah, sure. Actually, it's kind of a fun story. So I was on the heels of repatriating from Singapore, and cover your ears, Scott. We had a Rockwell salesman reach out to us, and he had an opportunity at a data center site in South Carolina where they wanted to try out some PLC control for their BAS. He didn't tell us the name, but when Craig and I pulled in, there's a big Google sign at the front of the campus, and we didn't know shit about data centers at the time. So on the drive down, Craig and I are reading books about airside and waterside economization and like all of the stuff we thought they were going to talk about. They didn't want to talk about any of that. They wanted to know if we could scale, and they wanted to see a demo of a live Rockwell system. So we did those two things, and they called us that night and they said, "You're in." We hadn't talked scope or money or anything. They just said, "You're in, and you're going to be our guys for the next wave of construction." And that was like 2011. That took us from 2 people to, our first 100. Yeah. And after that, our reputation in the space built, and it wasn't just Google, it was other companies coming and asking. And because of the investment and the growth in the industry, it just took off real fast.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Cool. Okay, we're going to come back to you because you got a lot more to share. But let's move it over to David now. And David, of course, he's also involved with the hyperscaling of the data center industry. As most of you know, Belimo has been an awesome partner to the BAS industry for many years. Not unlike Derek, they stepped into the data center world in a different way. And I'm going to let David tell you guys a little bit more about Belimo and himself and how that's going. So, David?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks. So my name is David, and I work for Belimo. I've worked for Belimo since last century also. That's great. I've never heard it said that way. I'm stealing that forever.
My young employees.
Yeah, I love it. It makes me feel ancient. This will make me feel even older. This is a room full of people who hopefully know a little bit about Belimo. I was a part of the original design team that designed the CCV. That's how old I am.
I remember that, David. That's how old I am.
Yeah. I'm going to disagree with Scott about something. He started by saying this was the Industrial Revolution. When we talk about it inside of Belimo, we say it's the gold rush of 1849.
Oh, okay.
And the reason we say that is all of the behavior is frantic and irrational. And there's a lot of money to be made, and there's a lot of people that are going to go broke trying to get it. So it looks like the gold rush to me. There's some value in it. How did Belimo get into this space? We are completely lucky. We just dumbed our way into it. So we made damper actuators forever, right? They're bulletproof. Everybody loves the Belimo actuator. It's got the warranty. It never breaks. I always tell people, they're like, "Oh, you got a 5-year warranty. What's that about?" I said, "None of our stuff breaks. We never have to honor it. Why else would we have a warranty that long?" So one day we get invited to go, somebody's like, "Hey, we're having some installation issues. It's super secret. We're not allowed to go anywhere," much like my friend's story here. We roll up. It's a Meta facility. We walk in. They have like 700 actuators in the building. We had no idea. Belimo doesn't sell directly to anybody who owns a building, and so we don't always know where our stuff winds up. That was in one room. We go into another room. There's another 700 actuators in that room. We're like, "How long have you been doing this?" It turns out we've been in the data center business like 25 years. We had no idea. So air-cooled data centers love Belimo. They're doing nothing but moving immense volumes of air. They're so much fun to walk in the building. They're like an entire wall of vent dampers, and it's just orange. And I'd like whip my phone out to take a picture because it's the best thing I've ever seen. I got tackled by 3 guys. They're like, no. So there's no evidence that that's actually true, but you just have to take my word for it. So where did this industry really shift? This is a fascinating story. There's a seminal event, you all know what it is, and it changed the entire trajectory of the data center market. In November of 2022, something very interesting happened. A small company called OpenAI, with no marketing or fanfare of any kind, released a beta version of ChatGPT. In 5 days, they had 1 million registered users. They didn't advertise this thing. In 60 days, they had 100 million registered users. Just for frame of reference, it took TikTok 9 months to get to 100 million. It took Instagram 2.5 years. They did it in 60 days. Another interesting factoid about this, as soon as that came out, the Google executives put out what they described as a red alert, and they said, this is going to kill how people search for things on the internet. And almost instantaneously, every hyperscaler was dumping buckets of money into figuring out how to put AI into place. Why is this a big deal? Well, AI servers are super warm. They put off heat at a level that's incomprehensible to what we do. So let's say you have an air-cooled data center and you want to convert it to a liquid-cooled data center. All you have to do is take 10 racks of servers out and put 1 in. For every 10 you pull out, you can put 1 in. That's how much electricity you have. That's how much cooling power you have. And oh, by the way, you got to switch from an air-cooled system to a hydronically cooled system. So please call me. I can help you with that.
Oh, that was awesome. You said a lot there, David. You guys want to give him a hand? I heard a couple claps. Let's go ahead. So David, you know, it's kind of funny how you mentioned you guys backed into it, but going into that chilled water design, could you just kind of, you know, dive in a little deeper into how you guys got into the modern design now with what you said and why Belimo was the choice?
Absolutely. So we've been experts in controlling fluid flow for a long time. We already had a good reputation with some of these companies because they knew us as the actuator that never broke. And it was fascinating in the early days of liquid cooling adoption because these massive companies, like I always say, there's like 6 companies that your grandma heard of, and those are the ones we want to do business with, right? We all know who they are. They started calling technical support at Belimo, and we're like, we're looking for a control valve to control some fluid flow. And they're like, who is this? They're like, oh, we work for a company called Micro something or other, but we don't want to tell you who that is. And then like somebody would frantically call me, and they're like, can you please call this guy back? I'm not sure. And suddenly we got in the room with these design teams who are saying, for the first time ever, we're going to run PG25, which is just a 25% glycol mix, to our server racks. And we need to control the flow in that, but we need to know kind of what's going on, and we have no idea what we're doing. So the Belimo Energy Valve is a valve that's got all kinds of bells and whistles in it and has become the fan favorite in the liquid-cooled industry for 2 reasons. The small reason is that it has an integrated flow meter, and so you can control to the exact amount of fluid you want going in there. That's great. Those racks of servers that NVIDIA sells cost anywhere between $1 to $3 million each. So we don't want to burn them up. But the second reason it's so valuable is that the energy valve has a fully integrated BTU meter, and you can integrate a differential pressure sensor into it. So suddenly you have an immense amount of transparency about what's going on. It's networkable. Through all of the great things that you all do, we can now pull that information out. We can view what's going on. We can send information out. I got a control valve on every single rack in the building. You want to change the flow rate by 10% on 1,000 control valves? I'd rather do that with 10 keystrokes than sending somebody out. The question I always ask customers, oh, you're going to put some other kind of device out there. How long would it take you to adjust 1,000 of them? And then how do you know it was done right?
Yeah. The power of data, right?
The power of data is where all of this stuff is.
For sure. Thanks, David. Okay, let's move it over to Joe. So Joe Steib. Joe is actually in a different position. Joe is not like, he didn't come into this like recently. Joe's company, Enabled Energy, that's what they're based on, is working with data centers to help them become more efficient. Now, I'm just going to turn it over to Joe to kind of take it from there. Joe, could you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, your company, and how you guys help data center owners?
Yeah, sure. So I guess I'm a dinosaur, but not a fossil also. So I started with GE doing controllers on helicopter engines, and that wasn't my jam. So I went back to school and got a degree to do buildings, do mechanical contracting. I worked with Southland Industries for a few years last century, and then jumped over to Honeywell for 10 years. So I was with Honeywell through the first part of this century, and found my way into the data center space 12 or 13 years ago with Enabled Energy. So there's a lot of news out there in the media about the greenfield construction, and there's an inordinate amount of demand out there. And like David said, there's like that the analogy of the gold rush being part of this industry is very real to us too. Our strategic plan is wrapped around that, but the people who made money during the gold rush are the people who sold the blue jeans and the picks to all of the prospective people. So that's what we're doing. We work only in data centers, and we only work in existing data centers. So I have a question for you. Make this a little interactive. How many existing data centers do you think there are in the world? Don't look at your phones.
20,000?
Any other guesses?
Throw some numbers.
Shy group. Existing data centers.
Throw some numbers.
And I'm really talking about purpose-built data centers here. I'm not talking 123,000. 323,000. Yeah, no. Well, you're way over. Scott's over also, so yeah.
Oh, we started high.
Yeah, you started high. Scott, 1,500, a little low. Scott was off by a factor of 2. There's 10,000 in the globe. So 10,000 existing purpose-built data centers. Doesn't sound like a lot of buildings, but I mean, there are a lot. If you add telecommunication facilities to that number triples. So these aren't the telco facilities. These are purpose-built data centers. 10,000. They've been around for a while. So this business has been around for a long time. Just like David said, he didn't know his valves were in the data center space. So the data center space is it's newer. The data center space hasn't gone through kind of a refresh of all the equipment that was built in the turn of the century. So that's a real thing too in those 10,000 facilities. But our company, Enabled Energy, just focuses on those 10,000, primarily the 5,000 that are here in the United States. And let me give you an example so that you can kind of get perspective of that. The 10,000 facilities use 60 gigawatts of power. That's the demand across the globe for those. Of that 60, 40 goes into the IT equipment, which means 20 goes into removing the heat from that IT equipment. My company looks at that 20, and we're trying to turn that to 15. Are we going to get to all 10,000 in the globe? No. But our gig is looking at that. So we have an ambition to go after, say, 5 gigawatts of power. 5 gigawatts of power in those existing facilities represents 5 nuclear power plants. It equates to 50 new 100 megawatt data centers coming online. It's 5 million homes. And it's the equivalent of, let's see, Seattle, San Diego, Phoenix, Denver, and Boston's grid power. Just 5, just 5 gigawatts. So our business is going after that. So that's that's the ambition, is to help groom that power out of those existing buildings. And there's two things you can do with that existing power. One is it's energy savings. It's at 9 cents a kilowatt hour. That's $4 billion in savings, which helps folks that are operating. But if you look at this thing from the other side of the coin, why are we building all of these things? It's for demand. That 5 gigawatts is power, and it's constrained. So freeing 5 gigawatts of power and releasing that out is actually $7.5 billion of new revenue in existing buildings. So depending on your perspective, it's good either way, right?
So you're not actually saving energy. You're reutilizing it in a more profitable way for the data center space. Is that another way of saying it, or?
It depends on your perspective.
Okay.
Some folks will have us come in with the idea of capacity unlock, and then they repurpose it for revenue.
Yeah.
Some people have ESG targets, and they'll ask us to come in, and they're EBITDA driven, so they're trying to refinance a tranche of facilities, and so they're looking for EBITDA improvement.
For sure.
And some people, most entities have ESG targets and that kind of thing. So
Is PUE
it's all of the above.
Is PUE real to them? Is that something they strive for, like that 1-to-1 relationship? Is that even real? Because you just told us it's 2-to-1 in reality. So
yeah. So it's real for, but I will tell you. The company's name is Enabled Energy. It's really, energy is part of our gig, but like the number one thing in this space, it's reliability. Mm-hmm. So having that resiliency in those existing buildings, like I don't care about energy. If you take my building down and I'm making $1 million a minute on this server being up, I don't care how much I save from energy standpoint.
Right.
But a lot of the hyperscale data centers want that freed up so that they can free up compute power and add on their sites, right? We're seeing a trend of some of the large hyperscalers. They've realized they can free up capacity for power, and they're building more server halls and canvas tents on the sites, because having the compute power, to your point, is more important than, if a bad thunderstorm comes through and destroys half the servers, they'll just throw them away and put more in, right? Having the access to the compute power is the most important thing right now.
Yeah, it's in this order. It's reliable, capacity, energy. But right now, the headlines, it's all about capacity. Do it in a reliable way has always been the standard, but I think a lot of folks are relaxing their standard on reliability because they want the compute capability, the capacity part of the equation.
And Joe, how does the grid come into play with these people? Because oftentimes, isn't it, they say it's a drain on the grid, and does that ever come into play with your business in terms of meeting grid demand, or is that not something these?
No,
Okay.
we're actually, we're involved in that. Like, we help people with BYOP, bring your own power. It's really behind the meter power.
Yeah.
There are some times where people signed up for 10 megawatts of capacity. They never used it, and the utility said, okay, your contract's up. We're going to repurpose. We had a call. It's like, we're short 5 megawatts, and we have a client that's expanding in our building, and we need that by next summer. Can you guys find that for us?
Yeah.
So they asked us to do 2 things. One was help them find some additional power that we could use, fuel cells or turbines or those kinds of things as more power, but also go in the building and save energy, because we need runway. Just like what Derek just said, it's like it's both.
Yeah.
So but I would tell you that the grid part of the equation in our orbit And we do 400 projects a year in existing data centers, but it exists. Like the capacity's there already. The space, power, and cooling's already there. So we're really more on retrofitting and improving and providing roadmaps to take these things from older data centers to more modern facilities that are able to, get another 20 years out of them.
Yeah. So, and I met Joe because Joe and his company started buying Niagara from Cochrane Supply, because Joe's company, they're an integrator. That's what they do. They go into the data centers. And Joe, could you speak a little bit to how you use Niagara in the data center space?
Yeah, our primary part there. So if you think about this, what's a data center? A data center is to computers what a library is to books. It has thousands and thousands of compute equipment in there, and so that's the primary purpose. So where the cooling has to happen down there at the server level, at the rack level. So we start there. So there's sensing that's needed there. Moving upstream, there's air conditioners. As David said, there's myriads of air conditioners, CRAWs, cracks, economization type things, all sorts of different, fan walls, whatever. They're around the perimeter, cooling off that equipment. So there's your first, to this conference, there's a lot of control that happens in there. There's a lot of older control that happens in there, and most of that control is original equipment manufacturers, and it's based on return error. It's just there on the machine. We'll go into those machines and we'll retrofit those things with EC fans or with VFDs. We'll bring a controller in there. We'll link into the existing control and then bring that upstream and either have a standalone supervisor that's running there, or we will integrate to a BMS at the white space level, and then at the gray space level out in the central plant, doing optimization work inside of the chiller plant.
And do you add metering through that process too for validation?
Yeah, so metering is something that we do. Honestly, the preponderance of our metering is more on the electrical side, because having an understanding of where all that kilowatt use is going, especially for co-location, they've got a bill on that.
Yeah.
So sub-metering, sophisticated sub-metering is part of the story there too.
Yeah, and I just want to point it out to the audience. These data centers are like the most intense BAS designs on earth. There's no more, like they talked about, like unimaginable amounts of heat that have to be moved. You're talking about and these are not big physical spaces. Like we're always thinking of millions of square feet type stuff. These are small spaces that are just so intense and moving heat and cool around. It's kind of cool, right? It's fun. So, but somewhere along the line, and now so this is, okay, a little dialogue for a minute. Excuse me, I have to go off a little. So one of the things that Robert's company, Conti, they when you guys walked into that project, there was pressure to make it an industrial PLC type design for the BAS system. I always wondered why the PLCs got into the data center design, but I don't know if any of you caught it, but Derek admitted he did it. I don't know if you guys heard that in his opening. He totally admitted it. It was Derek Dreyer and his partner from Rovasys who put BAS manufacturer. Did you hear that? There's the guy. So funny enough, he's like on the inside, but he got us. Derek, shame on you.
We'll put in whatever the customer is comfortable
Derek,
with.
Yeah, and the Rockwell sales guy brings you into, apparently. But good for that Rockwell sales guy. He should get a raise. Anyways, Robert, going back to your job. So do you remember when you guys were talking about it? What were the drivers that pushed? You mentioned some of it when you were talking, but could you speak to some of the other drivers like cost and some and familiarization with the products and some of those things? Was it ever a minute where you guys were like, no, let's do the industrial design?
No, Conti's been around long enough now, and I mean, Mitch, he's been around and everywhere for a long time now. He's very familiar with the systems, the sensors, the controllers, the systems that are out there.
Yeah.
He wanted to bring DDC, the data centers, and make it our own, basically. He never really diverted from that or thought to divert from that, from what I've seen.
Right. And Mitch, his boss, who I work with real closely, he's an amazing talent in the industry. what we figured out was the reality is that it's not really PLC versus BAS. The real approach is a hybrid approach is how it's really done. And we joke about the battles between the two, but no different than like you go into like a large university with the central plant, and you find that the large equipment in the central plant are on PLCs, but everything else are on typical mechanical controls. It's been around a long time in our industry. It's just Derek stretched the design real far because of the Rockwell sales guy. But I'll forgive him. But anyways, so Derek, going back to that. So now you're looking at all the new projects. We're talking about the industrial design versus the BAS design. Could you tell us what is the common design today in reality? What does it look like? And where does Niagara typically fit in? I know or not. Could you speak to a little bit of that? I don't want to get you too technical, but.
So, to your point, in the large equipment space, chiller plants and that kind of stuff, I see a lot of customers more comfortable with PLCs, and it's only one reason, and it's not even uptime. I think it's the true controller redundancy, right? No matter how you set up a BAS system with two controllers, if you have a failure on one, you're at least for one scan offline. And people just don't want to take that risk in that space. But the rest of the facility, it's whatever is most cost effective as long as it's tall enough to ride the ride.
How much of the system is redundant?
It depends on how you define redundancy. But
double control with failover.
Typically the chiller plant.
Okay.
That's where we see it.
Okay.
But it's funny to me, sometimes you'll see redundant I/O, redundant network, and a single controller. And I don't know why they do it that way.
Are they really putting PLCs on like Lieberts and stuff? Is that real, or is that just hyperbole?
I think that some people have tried it. I think it's a bad design.
Yes. Okay.
But
gotcha.
There are PLC fanboys out there that'll spec it in and try it.
Those industrial systems integrators, they never give up, do they? Never.
We just do what the customer wants us to do.
Always. Okay, cool. All right. So then I'm gonna push it down to David then. So David, going back into the design side and we were you talked about Belimo, and it's like it's everywhere in the projects and stuff. But for Belimo, what has it done to the overall business? Like at a high level, because of the growth, because of the scale. What are you guys doing to keep up with the demand?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Well, we all want to know because we have back orders we're waiting on, David.
For starters, I have a job, and so that's good. Hired a bunch of people with data center in their title. The answer to the question is that an enormous investment has gone into infrastructure in Belimo over the years from all of our growth. Now, this has been a little unprecedented, but if everybody remembers COVID, I'm sure we do, it was awful. And you remember how everything took 6 or 9 months to get to your projects during COVID, except your Belimo product. If you remember back to that, our lead times doubled from a week to 2 weeks, or maybe 3 weeks. So we were slower, but not by an order of magnitude that was measurable. Belimo's invested millions and millions of dollars in infrastructure. Like last century when I worked at Belimo in Connecticut, I would go into the factory and we had like these little roller conveyors and we had people with buckets of material putting stuff together. Giant 6-story robots moving materials around. Like, this is a world-class automation facility. I'm so outclassed when I'm in that building now. I'm like, I guess I'm a sales guy now. I don't even know what the hell's going on in the building. But Belimo continues to invest in multiple partner streams. So when you buy a control valve from Belimo, it always says Belimo. It looks exactly the same, but we got multiple people making those valves because the demand has gone higher than the supply at a one vendor. And if we call up hyperscaler A, B, or C and say we get our valves from one place, they go, we don't want to do business with you. And so all those things are at play inside of Belimo, which makes us robust. But, and I tell this to everybody, there's a bunch of Belimo folks back here, I'm going to blame all of them. When you call in and you jump up and down and say, my data center customer needs their valves, every time you do that, somebody else who's building something else somewhere in the country gets a delay in their valves.
Yeah.
And so we're doing a little bit of creative decision making, but the reality is it's primarily a first in, first out business. And I don't care if you're Microsoft. I had a guy I was talking to building the data center for Oracle, and he said, I need these valves in X period of time. I will pay you 6 figures to get me to the front of the line to build these valves. It's just not how Belimo does business. Like, we don't do it that way. So our goal is to grow as fast as everybody needs us, and we also recognize that the growth's slightly faster than what we're able to keep up with, but we're working on it hard.
Yeah, for sure. And so, Derek, back to you. So, you and I have talked, and you with these hyperscalers, the contracts that you're working on are large, but they're also term-wise, they're pretty long, right? Like this data center situation. How long is this going to go on with this intense hyperscale activity? How long do you predict we'll see this continue?
I think the answer is until somebody wins the AI battle.
Really? And what does that mean to win it?
I don't know. I liken it to like and maybe this is a bad comparison, but the old Betamax VHS thing back in the day.
Yeah.
There's going to be clear winners out of this, right? Right now, everybody's pouring money in to try and be the winner. But until we get there and the public decides who is the winner, I think you're going to see it continue unless, and you are starting to hear chatter about this, right? They start hitting political backwinds, right? People are starting to talk about, we don't want data centers in our state. We need the power for other things. Or water conservationists out west. Like Phoenix is the number 4 data center city in the country, and we're draining the Colorado River and there's nothing left. Those kinds of things could halt it.
Wait,
but
aren't these closed loop systems?
They are, but they need fed fresh water occasionally.
Occasionally. But I mean, Joe, what's the reality of that?
I can't predict that future.
What about real quick on the water cooled side though? You've been, like you said, data centers. Do they actually drain? Aren't they closed loops, or do they really need that much refresh?
Yeah, the preponderance of the ones even that we work on, they're closed loop.
Yeah.
I think the issue is the water for the power plants.
Agreed.
The electrical power plants.
Okay.
So that's an order of magnitude higher than the data centers themselves.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So that's where the pushback is.
I think that's what the issue is, yeah.
And isn't that capacity, though, is that really something that is like political capacity in power plants? I mean, is that what it's becoming? Like,
I think it's political if politicians want to start talking about it.
Gotcha.
Like, so for instance, we do work internationally, and in the city of Dublin, Ireland, they issued a moratorium, no more data center hookups to the grid until the end of 2027. And I think it's purely political, but that's where they're at.
It's funny to me because
hang on Dublin.
Sure.
They put that moratorium in after Microsoft, Meta, Google, and somebody else all built data centers in the city of Dublin. They made a fantastic amount of money for a city the size of Dublin. By the way, get to go there. It's gorgeous. So by all means, visit the data center.
And when I fly into Reagan National Airport and I look out the window as we're landing, what do you see on the ground? 300 data centers right in our political capital, the United States of America. And they're right next to each other there. They didn't do any urban planning when they built that thing. So
it is the number 1 data center metro area in the world.
Yeah, and they're all over each other there. So it's interesting. Okay, cool. But yeah, Joe, back to the timing. How long do you think going back to your business, have you seen your clients change with the hyperscale? First question, like have your demands changed? Are they trying to keep up with the big guys type of thing, or is that not the case?
So yeah, I would say again, our ecosystem is a little different than the gold rush that's going on in greenfield construction. So the preponderance of our work is more with co-location companies, enterprise operators, and telecommunication companies. These buildings are, they're 20 years old. So the challenges that they face are different than the heavy market-based challenges that I think a lot of the new construction is facing. So there's not a lot of headwinds in what we're trying to do. They are looking to unlock capacity.
Gotcha. That's their number one ask.
It's because of the marketplace.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's things like, I mean, we network computers around. We actually network the internet around. But like, if you're, say, a Verizon or an AT&T or a Lumen or somebody like that, some of the things that are really creative is metro mesh inside of those facilities. So you start to network 20 of your facilities together, and if you can get 250 kilowatts or 500 kilowatts among 20 facilities, like, wow, now there's some power, some real power and space and cooling inside of that metropolitan area. The challenge is, and I think, David and I have talked about this a little bit, is like, how do you repurpose those facilities to actually take on the AI load?
Gotcha.
That will need that.
So it's AI that is for them to participate. Updates required, more computing power, things of that. David, do you have something to add?
Yeah, this is all actually something you can all participate in. The way we're going to make things more efficient, the way we're going to get more capacity, and it doesn't matter if it's a 20-year-old data center or one that we built last week. The way we're going to do this is with information. So a bunch of years past, 10, 15 years ago, I started selling energy valves up and down the west coast of the United States. And we always talk about, hey, it measures all this stuff and it's wonderful, and data. And I would consistently have the same conversation. I'd have a facility director look me in the eye and say, who the hell's supposed to look at all this? We now have the answer. So in about 2013, a gentleman named Jim Gao, who worked for Google at the time, took a machine learning engine that was designed to play the Chinese game Go. If you don't know what Go is, it's like the little tokens you flip over. I have no idea how to play it, but apparently it's very strategic. So this machine learning thing beat the grandmaster of Go. And everybody was like, yawn, who cares? Somebody beat the grandmaster of chess like 20 years ago. Here's the difference. 20 years ago, they programmed the computer about every possible strategy of chess, every possible move that can be made. When they took AlphaGo, they just taught it the rules of the game, and they let it figure out how to be the grandmaster. So Jim Gao took this engine and said, all right, I don't want you to play Go. I want you to make the PUE of my building lower. He put it into his automation system. This is in 2013, or maybe it was 2014. He put it into his system, turned it on. What it started doing was making recommendations to the human beings that read in the building. He didn't turn the building over to AI. And in the first week, they had like a 10% reduction, 1 week, in how much they spent to cool the building. They let it run for a year, and then they wrote a paper about it because they had reduced the cooling cost by 40% and the overall PUE by about 15%. Wow. Now, he's gone on to all kinds of amazing things, and everybody's a little frightened to let AI just run their data centers. But the reality is here's why he was able to do it. The machine learning can sit down and take a look at, say, I'll just put it in my context. What is the flow rate going to the crawl unit or the direct-to-chip cooling? What is the differential pressure across it? What's the position of the control valve? What's the VFD of the pump and the fan and everything that's related to it? But at the same time, it's going to take a look at what's going on at the central plant, what's going on at the electrical plant, what are the outside air dampers doing? It's looking at a zillion different things at the same time. It's finding correlations that all of us, if we sat down for a year, wouldn't even think to look for.
What's the weather forecast?
Yep. Environmental things, like all kinds of craziness.
And here comes the Terminator.
Yeah, well, look, science fiction's 100% correct so far, by the way. We're in a place where gathering, collecting, and collating data for the use of exactly what Joe's doing, exactly what everybody's designing around, is how we're going to reclaim capacity. It's how we're going to use less water. All these data centers, the hyperscalers all have zero water consumption goals over the next few years. They're paying attention not because it's necessarily important to them, but because there's political pressure on them to do it. They're making money hand over fist. They just want everybody to leave them alone so they can do that.
Yeah, they're also buying power generation companies, and you'll be a fan of in the Midwest. They're going to go buy all the old Rust Belt manufacturing facilities that have.
Yeah, we talked about that. They're repurposing factories in the Rust Belt, and we talked about how it's a lot of it's because they already have the high voltage, transformers are sitting right outside, which is one of the biggest expenses when they build these things. So, yeah, great, we'll take it, right? In the Rust Belt, right, Derek, where we live. So that was great. All right, so I just want to draw one more correlation to this whole thing, and then the crazy thing about it, they're talking about now the AI conversation comes back up again. So we've been focused about AI changing our business. We've been focused on AI changing our relationship with our customers. But what's crazy is the AI is driving the data center boom, which is driving BAS growth. So we're seeing it in two different ways as an industry, which is amazing that we get to participate like that. We're so fortunate as an industry. I dragged my son into this business. I tell his friends, you want a place to come work for the next 50 years? This is the industry, because we're square in the middle of the technology phase that's going to be around for a long time. So I'd like to open it up to audience questions. We got a few minutes left. Justice, you going to grab a mic? Thanks.
Hi, I've got a question, I guess primarily maybe for Joe, but also Derek, you could probably address. You just mentioned power generation. I was curious of without putting you on the spot, making a prediction, power generation, getting off the grid, how close are we to your own personal, i.e. nuclear plant, nuclear in a box for a data center to get it off the grid? Removing it from some of the political of taking power. But I'm curious, specific maybe to Joe, because you've got 5,000 in the United States existing data centers that were all built on a certain design, and that power increase has gone 10x, 100x from when they were built. I would think that that's a prime market if and when the product exists.
I'll say, you can keep the mic. I'm going to say two things real quick, and I'll give the mic to Joe. One, you have a lot of job security coming because of those 10,000 data centers. They started as 5 and 10 megawatt facilities, and I'm aware of today, right now, 5 to 10 gigawatt campuses being built. So the amount of electricity, to your point, is going way up. Don't think that nuclear is not also going to be political, but I was on a meeting yesterday with somebody that wants to build 20 small modular reactor sites in the next 2 years, and it's all to power data centers.
But is that, theoretically it works, but it's not in production? It doesn't exist today, does it? It does.
Yeah, I think your question had the answer in it. You said when the technology is available. The data center, what I have learned, they will adopt the latest technology as soon as possible, as soon as feasible. So when nuclear is available at scale and politically consumable, it will happen. That's what I would say. There's my experience with the data center, and the reason that I went to the data center, the pace is fast, the talent is high, and so it's the challenges are a lot of fun. So from back to your question about nuclear, if it's available, they will use it.
And it's around. One of our engineers that's here with us this week is taking a break from working on that site to be here, but he's doing it right now.
Great question. More questions from the audience. You guys shy? Friday afternoon blues? No? Well, then let's go to where we go, Tim.
Thank you. I hear about quantum computing coming in the news, and that's supposed to fractionalize, the energy usage. Is this going to be a game changer for all you for designs, and how far out are they looking at that?
The one important fact everybody needs to know about quantum compute is they use they don't use electrons, they use something called qubits, which are quantum bits. And they're not ones or zeros, they are 1 and 0 and all the numbers in between, which gets really complicated and makes you dizzy. Here's what you need to know that's important. In order to stabilize qubits, they need to be at roughly 1/10 of a degree Kelvin. So that's how quickly you're going to get a quantum computing data center. Not very soon. I have a feeling we're going to get, like, governments will have a quantum computer, maybe a few, one here, one there.
Maybe some colleges or something.
You're not going to have a quantum computing data center anytime soon.
You need lots of liquid helium.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I can't
and
imagine.
none of us are going to play in that space when we get there. This is a whole other universe.
I don't know that it'll happen in our lifetime.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? No? Okay, well, I'd like to thank our panel. They were wonderful. Great conversation.